So since the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, how have you seen the news coverage of the Black community improving?
I think right after George Floyd, there was a definite concerted movement for people to cover situations like the Floyd case, to follow the Floyd case very closely. Also, there was an awareness, I think, of just Black people in our community. I can remember different places where I've worked where I had to fight to get coverage. And I was thinking about this today. I was remembering one time where I was trying to get people to cover a march or something in a Black community in another city where I worked. And a reporter who I thought should go out and cover it because it was happening during his shift, he said, well, if you think it's important, you go cover it. And I had been working all morning, So that was the attitude that I saw previously. I think now there's more of a willingness to take an interest in what happens in the community. But I also think that a lot of the urgency that we saw in the wake of George Floyd seems to be dying down just a little bit. That's my opinion. But again, I do think that there still is a consciousness. I know for my own company that we have had some training and different programs that have gone on internally to make people in-house more aware of coverage and how things are covered.
I write for an online digital website, and we cover the travel industry and credit cards and personal finance. And that is a very white industry. And so when George Floyd happened, I was very lucky that I had the buy-in of our CEO and our executive editor. The first thing that we did was partner with NABJ and make a donation. We also started paying memberships for people, but most importantly, our coverage started changing. We started hiring more journalists of color and freelancers because it's important to have that representation. I told my boss that Black people spend $130 billion a year on travel. That's a lot of money to leave on the table. I always like to point out the economics of it. When people see green, that's the color that everyone sees. And so our coverage has really changed a lot. Our newsroom, the people that we've hired has changed a lot. So overall, I am still cautiously optimistic because we're still doing the work.
So we were in a pretty good situation when it came to diversity as far as staff was concerned, but our coverage, I thought, lacked a little bit. So then with the outcry, because it just didn't come from the African-American community, it came from quite a few people outside of our community who decided to become allies at that point. Internally at KENS TV, I know that we started having very deep and difficult conversations about who we are internally and who we project externally. As a result, we changed our coverage by creating a segment. To me, it's not a franchise, but it's an ongoing segment called Together We Rise. And in Together We Rise, we shine problems on what's happening in our community, the problems, and hope that we can, find a solution together. So I guess it's problem-solving journalism, if you will. So that came as a direct result of what happened with George Floyd. I don't know that it would have happened if George Floyd had not occurred.
You think about devastation and what that does to a community. You look at New Orleans, and prior to Katrina, it was in bad shape, and everybody knew about it. It was like no mistake. What happened with Katrina, you saw all the inequities, all the lack of the levees, all that came through. All that came through. What George Floyd did, like COVID, shined a light on everything. I believe with George Floyd and COVID, it was a perfect storm. Now we have people, that have always had diversity programs. Some, didn't have them before, and no one, held them to task. So now you can look at a newsroom, like Marvin said, and actually count them on your hand. And people are looking around to see if you're compliant. I mean, you had, industry people that were not speaking up. Now they were saying, hey, well, what do you think about this? It was never part of the conversation. It was understood we got a problem, but let's just kick the can down the road and they'll get fixed later. George Floyd made everybody stop.
I think that it was an impetus for us to continue doing what we had been doing. There's always been a push for us to tell stories, of the African American community, of all communities. But it was a push for us to even do more.
But what would you say is the biggest impact this or improvement that you've seen so far? Was it, like Marvin said, a lot of diversity within the newsroom? Has that expanded? Has there been more DEI trainings? Have you guys had, you talked about some in-depth conversations within newsrooms. What was that like? What was the impact of those conversations?
I mentioned the training before. We've always had some ongoing training, but after the George Floyd thing and around that time is when we started taking that turn toward looking at ourselves, how we cover different issues, making sure that there is no bias, making sure that we do hear, communities and what they're saying versus just going with the status quo. I've got to say, when I came to KSAT, I was the only Black person there, and there hadn't been anybody for the prior 7 years before I got there. And then there was more of a willingness to have that diverse staff. But I think that one problem that I could say probably across the board, and I'm not just talking about KSAT, but just across the board, and I think in this market it's true, and in a lot of places where I've been, there are not a lot of Black people in the decision-making positions in the management. And that's where it starts, really, because I can be my Black self all day, but then if I come and present an idea or say this is happening and there's no one to understand and listen, that's part of the problem.
I see exactly what Katrina is saying. I haven't been in the San Antonio market very long, but what I have noticed is a lot of us have gotten those management positions. We have Black women heading up the Houston Chronicle and the Dallas Morning News. We have a Black man who's the #2 at the Baltimore Sun. We have Deshaun Drew, who is running Minnesota Public Radio up in Minneapolis. And I mean, I can go on and on. I have been keeping track of everyone who has been getting these management positions, and it's been a long time coming. And I think that, I don't think we would see this continuing growth if it weren't for what happened with George Floyd. But I think newsrooms in other parts of the country, the light bulb went on and said, yes, we have actual competent Black journalists who know what they're doing. And so let's put them up there in management. I mean, I was promoted and first person of color on our masthead. So I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful. I've seen this before, but this started in 2020 and we're getting into 2022 and I'm still seeing people being elevated. So I'm optimistic.
We still have more Black men on the air than I've ever seen in any markets that I've worked for. Normally, you would have a Black male, a Black female, and then the rest of the staff would look like other people. So I'm happy to say that we have that. Just 5 Black males at one station, unless you were in Atlanta or Detroit or Philadelphia or New York or somewhere, it just did not happen, especially in San Antonio. So that was rare and promising. When it came down to DEI training, though, we had quite a bit. We read Crucial Conversations so we can learn how to talk and not win the argument and all the things that it lists in the book. There were some things about DEI training that were really difficult to swallow. One of them was a lady who came in and recommended that when we're talking about what we describe as officer-involved shootings, when officers shoot someone and they're injured or killed, that we not say that the Black person was, or the African-American man or woman was armed because it creates a bias. And I just thought that was just lunacy. That's just my opinion. Because the reason that the officer says that he or she is shooting is because their life feels threatened. So if that person is unarmed, I think that is a fact. But in their opinion, they thought that we shouldn't say that because it creates a bias that makes the African American look dangerous. So that there were some things about training that I kind of could accept, and there were some things that I didn't accept. But as I thought about the whole situation, I thought I was very happy that there were people who were at the table who were able to give voice. But as you all were talking about, we need more people who are behind the scenes, who are making decisions. It's important to keep people on air. 5 people on air who are Black is phenomenal. But what about 5 people behind the scenes who are in marketing, who are in sales, and who are in general managers positions, who are in vice president positions in corporations and can make a difference there. I think that is crucial.
It was a real joy to see non-Black people report on Black issues. It really allowed them to kind of see us for the first time. I know some of the things that we're developing now, I wanted to show respect, from that perspective, because a lot of times it's the messenger, and we can have Black reporters report on Black issues, but it's when the non-Blacks do the reporting that it gets their attention. Just corporately, to see how they were able to maneuver quickly. We talk about George Floyd and what happened, but also it kind of made people kind of focus on who's doing business. Again, back to that perfect storm. This was during the Donald Trump era. As much as we can say Donald Trump, divided the country, he exposed the country. It exposed our neighbors. It exposed our bosses. It exposed our media. It exposed who we spend our dollars with. I like it. I mean, I think it's important to know who you're dealing with. Because I am a small business and we run a media company, a lot of times, we weren't getting the opportunities. Not that that's a whole lot has changed, but now I know who the players are, because you can assume a few things, from, who they supported, whether it was Trump or not, or Biden, or, whatever the political affiliation. You kind of know what's going on now.
This happened last year. We kind of reinstituted the teen team. We reach out to young folks around the city to come in and, we can mentor them and, help get them started in the career field of journalism. And hopefully we'll expand it even more this year to include those sections, of the city where high school students may not have access to journalism, a career field that maybe they're interested in. So we're really excited about getting out and bringing, more people of color, young folks of color into, our career field.
This was mentioned, the urgency and drive of covering the Black community after George Floyd is kind of waning a little bit. And Bené, I want to come to you first, because you are a part of NABJ. You've had national positions. And how do we encourage diverse coverage when reporters, editors, producers are majority white or white passing?
Always tricky because, on the one hand, you're an NABJ chapter member, or you're a member of the national organization, but you also still want to keep your job. So there's always that fine line. We had a situation in Baltimore where a local anchor was, we've had issues with our mayors, just like every other city, but the past 2 mayors were Black female, and this white anchor said something that was kind of came across as derogatory. So as a chapter, we asked, it was the local CBS affiliate, we asked them to have her give an apology. We did not ask to have her fired. We just said, this is offensive. This is the problem. Well, they chose to fire her. And then, of course, that got into a whole nother situation in the city. People were flaming our Twitter account and our website and everything, and we got threats. But we never asked for her to be fired. All we asked was for a meeting with the affiliate and to have her do an apology. So, you can't take your foot off the pedal when it comes to advocacy and pointing out things, even though sometimes it can be uncomfortable for a chapter, because people need to be made aware. And it's still important, even in this post-Floyd time that we're in, that advocacy just never goes away.
At first, just started out covering the things that I was interested in. And a lot of that was, in the African American community on the East Side, Northeast Side, going out making contacts, and those contacts are still, value sources to this day, because I always thought it was important, that you open the paper, it should reflect, the city, so that meant going out, knocking on doors, introducing myself, eating at different places, in the East Side and the Black community, and just started to, freelance and bring these stories to the editors, and they were like, okay, yeah, sure. So that's always been a thing that I've learned from mentors, at the paper. Folks at SAABJ, the encouragement to go out and tell these stories. And, so that when you open the paper up, there's an African-American young lady, or the 106-year-old woman who's just phenomenal, a Republican, these human stories, just to show folks, hey, man, we're all alike, But there were some stories that, when we first came here, we just didn't see. And, but the editors were like, you have free reign to go out and tell these stories. And so I've always just, taken what they've given me, that access, that free pass to go out and do it and try to do the best we can. And, I'm happy to say that we have a lot of the colleagues that I work with, they go out and try to do the same thing. So we try to reflect the city in our reporting.
You have to be a noisemaker, but you can't just come with noise. You have to come with solutions. You can't be that empty wagon that makes a whole bunch of noise. I think it's okay to be the bull in the china shop, but you can't come with just bull. You have to come with solutions. So I don't mind being the voice or one of the voices at my station. I don't, and my bosses know this. I tell them all the time, I am a very strong accountability partner, because I'm going to hold you accountable for what we agreed on. What we agreed on at our station is that we were going to acknowledge, that we were going to listen, we were going to educate, and we were going to try to heal. Everything that we do for coverage, for Black stories, for Hispanic stories, for any kind of DEI story, has to go through those four things. We have to acknowledge, we have to listen, we have to educate, we have to heal. If we're not going through that, then we're not doing it.
In the past, in other situations, in other newsrooms, I have felt like I was the only voice and had to advocate for things. There have been some times here even where I've said, oh, well, we should cover this. This is happening. And then I'll go back and say, hey, did we cover this? Well, no, we didn't have enough people. But, I know if we had a shooting or something, that would get covered, you know what I mean? In that same area. But I think that in my station, though, there are people, for the most part, everyone is willing to listen, at least, and to be open to hearing what I'm saying. So I don't feel like I'm this noisemaker and nobody's listening to me. I think that there are people who are willing to listen and hear what I'm saying. And I feel like I do have the respect that if I say, hey, this is important, for the most part, they are going to listen and try to at least give it some attention.
There are some major corporations in this city, I won't name them, but they will not meet about African American issues. So you kind of already know without them saying yes or no, just the fact that they won't have a meeting tells you everything you need to know. I know for what we do, there is, there's some agencies here locally. Again, not going to say their names, but they will not acknowledge African American excellence. They will not acknowledge African American stories. We have the track record. Just like Benet was saying, there's some qualified individuals for the things that we do. We don't necessarily get acknowledged locally, but we win national awards every year for the last 10 years. We win. We don't get second place. We don't get third place. We win every year. But we don't get acknowledged locally. But because I'm a small business, there is no DEI, kind of conversation that we have. Because we're small business, our issues are a little bit different. But I enjoy the conversations that we're having. Again, George Floyd and the pandemic allowed the government to act fast. They were able to identify, I think because of 2008 economic downturn, that they were able to move quickly. They were cutting checks to everybody. That stimulus check and the $1,300 a month and $300 for kids, that stuff happened, probably saved our whole economy. But these are real conversations. They got the data, just like, we have the data. Knowing, again, the rules of engagement and how your people are going to be affected keeps me, working hard, because my issues are, I don't want to say they're standard, but I knew we had issues in our community, whether it was healthcare, education, economics, technology, all that stuff was exposed. And not that we were saying the sky was falling prior to, but we were bringing it up way before George Floyd. I enjoy being able to, kind of have flexibility and freedom. I don't have a boss, so there's no rules on our end. So for us, it's really just a matter of access and, to a degree, capital. But that's not going to stop us.
I want to hear from you guys, from your heart. Do you feel valued as a member of the Black media? Do you? And that's a true question, because I know, some days we wake up and you guys may face challenges where you're advocating for Black stories, and you may feel like you're being heard, but it may not go the way we want to. So, but let me hear from you.
It almost felt like a sermon popped up in my head, because the first words were, I'm still standing. I'm still standing. I'm still here. So yes, I feel valued. The Marvin Hurst that came here in 2004 is definitely different than the Marvin Hurst that is talking with you at 2022 on this day. I never thought that I would get the opportunity in this market to tell the story of Black women, to let Black women have their say, to talk about all that ails them, how they're viewed as angry Black women, and the challenges that they face within their community. I never thought that I would have the opportunity to examine the really, I don't even know how to describe the relationship between police and people of color, but to be able to share the story of that critical intersection where they meet and they don't meet, to be able to tell the story of law and race, to get down dirty and find out, that the officer walks into the courtroom with capital, and that, sometimes people of color are immediately viewed as the villain because the officer has that capital. To be able to share those kinds of stories would lead me to the answer of yes, I think my voice has value. Yes, I brought those suggestions and pitches to the table. Yes, they made air. So yes, I'm still standing. And yes, I think that I will continue to have that.
I absolutely do. But, like Marvin said, the Benet Wilson that started her career in 1985 on a typewriter and the Benet Wilson now are very different. There were a lot of things that I swallowed and put up with early on in my career that I don't anymore. People understand exactly where I stand and how I feel in my newsroom and just in the industry in general. So I feel more valued than I ever have in my career, as a matter of fact.
How do I follow those? I do feel valued in the newsroom. I feel like, how do I put this? I feel like I would be valued no matter what color I was, but the fact that I'm a Black woman, I think does carry some weight. I have been, in a position where someone will ask me something, well, what does this mean? Or what do you think about that? So yeah, I think that I'm sort of a source of information when people don't have that information themselves, when it affects our issues. So I do feel like I'm valued in that sense.
I think that, our management and editors, they push all of us to, to find our voice and to share that voice and to share the stories of everyone in the city. And they really encourage us all. I mean, our editor, encourages us and even brings us different ideas to sit one-on-one with us, and to discuss the type of stories that maybe haven't been told in the past, and so we've been very fortunate. I've been very fortunate to be part of, this push to share these stories of maybe folks whose stories, never have been heard, or that sector of the city who maybe haven't had their stories told. So yeah, it's an ongoing project at our newsroom for us to go out and find those stories and to share those stories. So yeah, I feel like my voice is valued at the newsroom.
I think for us, it's value like a vehicle, right? You buy it, it's all shiny and new, and in time it fades. Not that what we do has faded, but there will come a time, whether I'm alive or not alive, that folks will be able to look back and say, remember back in 2020 or back in 2012. They'll be able to pull a book out of our encyclopedia of content and be able to go to that year and look at what happened. It brings me joy to know that we've been able to document as much as we have had, whether it's the MLK March, the Omega White Party, the Marvin Hurst profile, the Katrina Weber profile. They can actually go to their shelf and pull it and find out what Marvin Hurst was doing, what Vincent was doing. That's hard to pull up on your phone, but you can pull out a book and you can go right to it. So, the value might not be right now, but in 20 years, maybe I'm not here, maybe Marvin's not here, Vince is not here, Katrina's not here. But they better pull one of those books and say, yeah, they were part of our community. This is what they've done. I'm glad this person thought enough to include them. Not that we're elitist or not including people. It's just there's only so much time in the day, and we want to do our part.
This is a valuable conversation. We have come a long way, you guys, and we have much longer to go on this journey. So this is like an exciting time to be in communications, journalism, public relations. I want to tell the audience, please visit saabj.org to learn more about us, donate to our scholarship, become a member. Thank you for joining us on this conversation tonight. And we hope to have more conversations for you in the future. And that is it for us, signing off.